Hello, everybody, and I hope you can all hear me. I'm going to unmute your microphones just to see if there's life out there. Um, Let me see if I can get this right. Right, is Laurentia, I can see you're there.
Yes, Ivor.
Okay, well, welcome. And don't give me too much of
Thank
a
you.
hard time, Laurentia. Just remember that this is an art, not a science at this moment in time.
Now I'm going to put you under cross-examination.
I'm going to put you under cross-examination. You're the people that dropped us as a country. Nevertheless, let us start. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and welcome to what I hope will become a daily, if not every second day, kind of an activity, just to reconcile where we are and to deal with some issues and problems which crop up. What I want to do this afternoon is just refer to the following topics. Number one, I want to remind everybody of why we're here, i.e., the purpose. I want to talk about staffing issues in your SME shutdown. I want to talk about assets and all of the information we've had today around assets, particularly assets and liabilities, by the way, particularly from the Minister of Trade and Industries. And all his various undertakings of gazettes, which would have been published this afternoon, although there is still a little bit of time this afternoon for the publication. As soon as the various publications come through, I will post them on the various on our WhatsApp group. There are some publications I'm going to be referring to today, and in fact, I will then copy them to those people who are on this call in a resource list as well. But in talking about assets and liabilities, I want to talk about banks, credit providers, and landlords, because it's those areas where we've had some very positive undertakings. Just as a matter of interest, when we talk about staff, I want to talk about SDL and UIF payments. I want to talk about UIF funding for your staff who are on the Americans call it furlonged, but who are on the enforced 3 weeks. I want to talk about use of leave, sick leave, and also ETI, and why it's very, very important not to throw the baby out with the bathwater as far as ETI is concerned, because of what the president promised us yesterday. And I'm sure we will shortly be seeing gazettes about in terms of the 500 Rand per ETI candidate tax subsidy that you can be deducting, and that can become applicable in the process. So, and then finally, I want to just look a little bit into the future, particularly because we're joined by some very innovative and creative people out there. Ronnie, I see you're online, etc. People who can talk to us about marketing and sales online. We're going to talk about financial and administration affairs online that you'll be conducting online for your businesses. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Are there any specific issues that is not on what I've said I want to chat about that any of you would like to have added to the agenda today? I hope you did all see the affidavit for the essential services out there. If you want, we can add talking about a couple of general subjects, and I will talk about the affidavit and how it should be used.
Ivor, this is Di. How are you?
Hello, Di. So nice to hear your voice.
And you, thank you. Welcome back. I just wanted to very quickly ask, just in terms of retail, if you have any idea, and we can get to it in your time, the retailers that will remain open, and will they be affected in terms of trading hours?
Okay, so we'll talk about retailers as well. Anything else, guys, that you want added to the agenda? Anything else? Going once, going twice. All right, let us start. Good. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me see if I can do this. Let me see if I can actually see you. No, I can't. It doesn't matter. All right. So, I just want to remind it very much is becoming a scenario of us and them. the government is doing this to us. Certainly, I've had comment after comment from business people about how unsatisfied they are with the whole process. And I think it's critically important at this juncture to remind everybody that no one, including the government, is here by choice. Neither us nor any South African government, in fact, has ever had to deal with a situation of this magnitude and this sort. And it is actually quite amazing to me how every single government department is coming to the party. They're rallying, they're doing what they need to do. They're coming out with gazettes, which very often take months and months to negotiate, let alone to publish. And I really think it's absolutely remarkable how quickly our government is reacting. And so I remind you of the purpose. The purpose is simply to flatten the curve. This action is being taken to buy South Africans enough time to save each other's lives until such time that there is an antidote in the marketplace, which is generally accepted by at least one other country's health department and food and drug administration type of organization. So all our government is trying to do is flatten the curve. And when they talk about flattening the curve, what they mean is this. They're trying to say that if it is inevitable that South Africa will eventually get to a point of having 1 million people infected within 40 days, let's try and make that 6 months so that within 6 months, there is an antidote on the market. There is some kind of treatment regime that works on the market. They are buying us time, and we are buying by our actions. We are buying ourselves that time. This is not something the government is doing to us. This is something the government is doing for us. And so, even though it is extremely disruptive to our businesses and to our industries and to our sectors, if we do not rally around collectively, we're going to die. It's that simple. If there are 1 million people infected and only 5% of those million people die, that is a huge number. And we're not even going to be able to bury our dead. And I'm sorry to sound so graphic, but we are not even going to be able to bury our dead unless we understand that all the government is doing is creating a platform for you and for me to save each other's lives. And it starts with the lives of our staff, because let's be honest, if you employ 100 people, there are at least 20 people you're going to want to have come back to your business when you open your doors again. And you want to save those 20 lives. And in the process, if you save the other 80 lives, well, that's a bonus. But the point I'm trying to make is the platform is being provided for us, but it is really up to us now. And what the government is also doing is finding funds for us within a very narrow budget and fiscal allocation regime, finding funds for us to try and cushion the fall for our businesses. So I think we need to respect what is going on. And I want to start off by saying that, because there seems to be far too much criticism out there. And there's some of that criticism, by the way, is deserved. And I think we've seen the most amazing thing happen today. That at the start of today, there were some very definite messages from the Department of Small Business coming out to say that if you're not a 51% black-owned small business, then tough, you're not going to get any kind of small business assistance. But by this afternoon, the minister had been so publicly embarrassed because of how she was playing the race card at this time in this part of the history of our country that she's had to backtrack completely. And by the time the Gazette is finally published this evening, I think we're going to see a completely different scenario. And that's because of the public saying, we're not going to take this. It's bad enough we have this situation. We're not going to let race get in the way. So we have a responsive government, even if it's because the president has had to wrap the minister of small business over the knuckles, I nearly said something else, over the knuckles for, in fact, the action that she's taken and how she's infuriated essentially white business in this country, which is certainly playing its part. So I think that's a beautiful dynamic that's happened today. People are finally standing up and saying, we're not going to take this any longer. I think that's absolutely fantastic. So let's start. Let's start with an issue around staffing. And let's talk about the fact that what we've had so far are either gazettes or in fact just letters issued by different government departments that haven't yet been reduced to gazettes, or in fact simply indicators, but no finalization and nothing really to depend upon. So the first indicator is this, and that is that in some measure or form, and we should know certainly by Thursday how, but in some measure or form, you are not going to have to pay all or some of your skills development levy for the period of the shutdown, and possibly even for the period thereafter, should the shutdown be lifted, but the virus still be active in the population. In other words, should people still need to stay home in one way or another, even if only those people who've contracted the virus and therefore need to be in exile, or alternatively in voluntary exile because they might have been in contact with someone who's contracted the virus. So the bottom line is this, that at some stage we are going to be notified, and it will certainly be by the end of the week, as to whether or not we will have a relaxation of not having to pay 1% of payroll as a skills levy, or alternatively part of that 1%. But I anticipate it'll be the full 1%. And certainly the Minister of Higher Education and Training has said it'll be the entire skills development levy. But let's be honest, at most at this stage, it'll be 1 month's worth of skills levy that you'll have a relaxation for. But my feeling is it'll last a lot longer than that. As far as unemployment insurance fund payments are concerned, certainly the Minister of Labour has said that we will be relaxed from having to pay unemployment insurance fund contributions for the period of the shutdown, which is 3 weeks. But presumably it will at least be for the months of March and the months of April at this moment in time, but possibly also May and beyond if we don't get this thing properly under control. So you know that from a skills development levy point of view and a UIF point of view, those relaxations will be made. Now, for those of you who are currently playing around in the field of ETI, the employment tax incentive, that should actually be very good news, because in fact, if you work it out properly, that is at least then going to be 100 Rand out of every 1,000 Rand deduction that can be considered as pure income to your company for administration purposes, if you are not having to pay skills development levy and UIF on that ETI money that in fact is deducted from PAYE at the end of every month. So in fact, you will be making a net income to be added to your payroll if that happens. And certainly we've had an indication that it is happening. So not if it happens, but when it happens, you will be in that net positive situation of being able to transfer at least 100 Rand out of your ETI into this benefit. All right, so moving on. UIF proper. Now we have had the Gazette, and the Gazette has told us that in fact, because it is an enforced furlong of 3 weeks, for the period of that 3 weeks, you can expect that your staff will receive up to 70%, that's 70, up to 70% of income by way of UIF payments back to them, which means that because of the enforcement, that you won't necessarily need to be in a position where, in fact, you are having to essentially pay your staff and deduct leave. Those payments will come back to them by way of UIF. And in fact, we have it on authority from the minister's office that it will be done automatically and immediately, so that when they expect their normal pay check, they will get their UIF. I think there is a very healthy sense of skepticism out there as to whether or not the department is actually able to handle this kind of an obligation, but time will tell. But certainly the indicator, the Gazette, the entitlement, the right is there on a shutoff like this for you simply to have indicated to the department and therefore to activate that UIF payment for that individual. And a little later, we'll go over the Gazette as well. I think what I do want to say to you is this. Ladies and gentlemen, it is absolutely critical, and you need to impress this upon your staff, that we need to bank as much sick leave as is possible before they use that sick leave. Whatever is left by way of sick leave should be protected and should be nurtured within your organization, because certainly after the layoff, after the lockdown, you are going to want your staff to have access to sick leave that they might have had up until now, and you do not want them to have to dip into that sick leave. Because remember, you do not take sick leave for self-imposed quarantine. Sick leave is there in this respect. Sick leave will be there for medically induced quarantine because the individual has either has either contracted the virus or is in quarantine because it is suspected they've been tested, but they've not yet been found to have the virus in place. So it's critically important that you bank as much of that sick leave as is possible until it's needed, and please God, it won't be needed. But if it is needed, it is only maximum of 36 days over a 3-year cycle that they can have banked. And then the bottom line is leave will have to have kicked in. And once leave has kicked in, then in fact, unpaid leave will have to kick in. So it is absolutely critically important that you understand that. Any questions before I carry on in this regard? I will unmute your mics. Right, any questions? Anybody want to ask anything?
Ivor,
Yes.
can you hear me? Is
can
people
hear you.
struggling to get on? Is people struggling to get on?
Okay, I'm not sure. So far we've got 18 people on. I don't know why there would be people struggling to get on. I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to post the invitation again. Just give me a second. I will post the invitation.
But mention it on the group line because they're indicating that the signal they're getting is that they're waiting to go on.
That's very strange. Like I say, there are 18 people already online, but we will keep endeavoring to get people to come online. All right, so just give me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just do that. Yes. Sorry, who was that? Yes.
In your invitation, it's Sharon Haig.
Sorry?
If in your invitation, there are actually 2 links, and it's the first link, not the second link. The second link will put them on hold. The first link goes into this.
All right, so I'm going to thank you for that. I appreciate that. How do you know that, by the way?
Because we've all been waiting on the second link.
Oh.
Yes.
All right. You know, I'm not a technical wizard. Let me just quickly sort this out. Okay, so I'm going to quickly post this on the WhatsApp group. You really are embarrassing me, people. I must tell you, my ego cannot take this.
We're here listening to you. Come on.
All right, there we go. I posted. Whoa, Corona. All right. Moving on. Okay. All right, let's move on.
Sorry, before.
Yes, sorry.
It's Dave speaking before you.
Hello, Dave. Yes.
The UIF payment of a maximum of 70%, will that obviously be for the 3 weeks which is due, not the full salary which is due to the employee?
No, it will be for the full period of the layoff and as long as they are off. So if it's for the 3 weeks, but the 3 weeks is then extended, it will be for the full period that it is extended for at this moment in time. It is, however, anticipated that at some stage they're going to have to restrict that only because of the fact that that money is going to run out. So it cannot happen in perpetuity. For example,
so if we decide...
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, apologies there. If we decide to bring back, because obviously you don't know what business is going to be like when you're back. You don't know who's paid you, who hasn't paid you, what you can afford, what you can't afford. So if we decide to bring back critical service members up front on the 17th, assuming that the shutdown ends on the 17th, and then a few days later or a week or so later decide to bring back the next team member over a period of the next month, while that team member is laid off, are they still eligible to claim UIF for the period that they're laid off, or will the UIF cease to pay on the day the shutdown ends?
If the shutdown is not extended, thank you for that question. That's a critically important question. If the shutdown is not extended, then in fact, the only time they will be covered is if they remain in isolation because they have contracted the virus, or because there is a medical certificate saying that they have to go into 14 days of quarantine for whatever reason.
Okay, fine. So then it's up to the employer to cover the balance of the time from the 17th to the end of the month?
It is up to the employer to cover the balance for the period that the individual comes back to work for. Absolutely. There is also a moral question that is worth considering, and that is whether or not the employer should morally want to cover the 30% that they in fact are not receiving when they receive the 70% that they will receive. Sorry, there was someone else asking a question?
Sure. Thanks, Albert.
Yes, Lorenzo.
Can I just ask the 70%? That's not guaranteed to everyone. Is it the normal sliding scale that would apply?
No.
So like for your earners that above thresholds, they'll get like 38%. It's not 70 guaranteed for everyone.
At this moment in time, the threshold is not being applied, but the minister has said there will be a supplementary gazette applying a threshold. And when that happens, we'll know exactly how the formula will work. But it's no longer the 4-day, 1-day kind of a scenario that was in the original gazette.
All right, but you'll share with us the gazette once it's published.
No, I have no intention of doing that, Lorenzo.
Please.
All right. No, of course. All right. To those people who've just joined us, thank you very much. The reason you couldn't get on is Jacqueline and Lorenzo actually blocked you. Okay, so moving on, I'm just going to mute everybody. There we go. So moving on now. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that there is an inclination amongst those companies who've been playing around with ETI, where they've linked ETI to a whole series of other programs. There is an inclination for individual companies to want to drop elements of ETI and the various intricacies of ETI. What I do want to implore you to do is continue with your ETI activities until such time as we have specificity in a gazette as to how that additional 500 Rand per person per month is intended to be activated by the presidency. We do not anticipate that it'll be very long before we have specificity. There's absolutely no reason to think that the only thing that will hold off clarifying is ETI. So we could very well have a gazette today or a gazette before the end of the week. But what I'm saying to you is don't play around with ETI until we know exactly how ETI is going to be affected positively, because it's only positively that ETI itself, the employment tax incentive itself, will be affected. What the president has announced is that they've factored in additional tax relief through the ETI structure that is already active in your business. So I'm imploring you not to do anything, change anything, or play around with anything until we know specifically how they want to play around with ETI and change anything about ETI that might need to be changed. And I know it is frustrating, but again, yes, sorry.
So before you move on off this point, just jumping back to the UIF funding, are directors in a position to claim UIF if the business is non-operational?
No, I don't think so. At the moment, the Gazette simply indicates that it is UIF for individuals who would have qualified for UIF payments at the end of the day. But ultimately, at the end of the day as well, if directors are not taking a salary and not taking a drawing, they could be included in the claims. My feeling is it'll be very much administered on an algorithm of bottom up rather than egalitarian payments throughout the system. But it's too early for me to answer that definitively. I'm waiting for the next Gazette, and I think that after we get the next Gazette out, we will have more clarity. But what I will do is once we finish this set of discussion topics, we will then move on to, in fact, discussing some of those documents. And as you can see, there's a whole range of documents in the background we will discuss, including, in fact, the UIF document, but also the temporary relief fund, which has been released. So let's come back to that question. Just put that question on hold for the moment. As far as
thanks, Alva, much appreciated.
Right. As far as assets and liabilities are concerned, so the reality is we heard from the Minister of Trade and Industry this morning that we could expect a Gazette by this afternoon that would give banks and financial institutions permission to vary the rules that they operate according to so that they could give relaxations. And relaxation means a holiday in terms of bond repayments, in terms of loan repayments, in terms of interest accruing. Those are the three specific areas around financial services that I think we need to be aware of and we need to be woke to. Now, the reality is the banks have been now told officially that they can go ahead and do those things. The feeling is that there is a guarantee that is being given to those banks from government, which would be an incentive to those banks to want to do those kinds of things on behalf of their clients, because as we know, banks are never going to be that forthcoming or that selfless unless their potential losses are guaranteed in some form or another. So the reality is, once we have that final gazette out, which we're expecting this afternoon, for this afternoon we could equally read tomorrow morning, but once we have that final gazette out, we will know exactly what you will be entitled to negotiate with your bank about. Now, I've already started saying to my clients today, get hold of your bank, get hold of your personal bankers and say, we want a 3-month relaxation on our bond repayment and on our debt repayment to you. We also want to know how you're going to relax the interest which is accruing over the period. I don't think it'll be a total relaxation of interest. I think it'll be a graduated percentage of relaxation on the interest which accrues. But nevertheless, there will be a significant relief for you so that at the end of the day, you're able to potentially pass some of that relief onto your employees. Please always remember, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to be given this buffer here so that you can then pass as much of the relief onto your employees and yourself as is possible, rather than simply continue to do business as usual. Although for the majority of you, it can never be business as usual until things completely change anyway. But you do need to understand that this relief has been created by the president for you so that you can then pass it on in such a way that it doesn't cost you at the end of the day, and you don't incur and suffer losses at the end of the day. So you really have to be very artistic with the little that you are given in the process. As far as online activities are concerned, you are entitled, by the way, to continue on a remote basis to operate the administration of your business, the financial management of your business, and your marketing and sales activities. You're only precluded on essentially any blue-collar activities. And when it comes to white-collar activities, in-house management activities, which might be required of your most expensive resource, which is in fact the people who work for you. But outside of that, you are fully entitled to continue to operate a business as usual in a remote way and on a remote basis, on a remote platform, as long as your clients are prepared to play with you in the same respect. We are going to hold a marketing and sales webinar. I have asked a couple of people to participate in that webinar to work with your marketing and sales people in developing online markets, in retaining customers through online strategies, and in fact, even in sourcing new customers on an online basis for your business. So it doesn't have to be doom and gloom in terms of the total shutdown of your business. It shouldn't have to be doom and gloom in terms of the total shutdown of your business. It just means that physically people should not be in your business premises. Any questions about that? Because I know that I've received in the course of the day, I've received a number of very strange questions about that, particularly in terms of companies asking about distinguishing between blue-collar and white-collar employees, where the white-collar employees are saying that they want the same benefit that the blue-collar employees have got, and more importantly, the blue-collar employees are seeing that those white-collar employees who obviously earn significantly more than blue-collar employees are in fact continuing to earn, while they are in fact being reduced to 70% of their salary, if that. So it is an issue. It's more of a group dynamic issue than anything to do with labor relations. It doesn't create an unfair labor practice, because remember, we're being ordered to do these things. And Laurentia, maybe you want to come in here. It is a difficult scenario to have to try and manage, isn't it?
Sorry. Yeah, I just think, I mean, for me, it's just the type of role and responsibility that will determine whether you can work remotely or not. So for me, there's nothing unfair in that, in principle. But yes, I think you could find some resistance from your unions and the blue collars where they sit without any income because they can't work. But for me, it's not unfair or an unfair labor practice or a discriminatory practice. I think you can justify that distinction.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions before we carry on? All right. I'm going to mute everybody again so we can carry on. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's just talk very briefly now about two things which we've been asked to chat about. The one is the affidavit, and the fact that I have asked Donnie Pretorius, who's a senior partner at Fluxman's, to draw us up a very standard template for an affidavit, which he has done. We have posted that on the WhatsApp group. And the purpose of that affidavit is specifically for companies which are on the essential services list, either because they are front-facing essential service businesses or because they supply essential service businesses in the process. Now, funnily enough, I was asked a question. If my manufacturing business has 10 elements of supply, and 2 of those elements supply essential services, can I keep all 10 elements in operation? Can I justify that I'm part of essential services and keep it in operation? And so the reality is this. The answer is this. A large proportion of the answer is about self-monitoring and responsibility. It goes back to the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing. If we take excessive advantage of the situation, when in fact we're being told the major rationale is to get people to stay at home so we can flatten the curve, but nevertheless we take exceptional abuse of the system, we abuse the system exceptionally, then all that is going to happen is we're going to screw it up for each other, we're going to kill each other, and more importantly, we're going to be back here in the next month. So it really is about your self-control. If there are 2 out of 10 elements of your business which supply essential services, and those are not linked through a common production facility, then run those 2 elements for the essential businesses and lay off the other 8 elements. Don't be greedy, and it's wrong of me to use the term greedy because many of you are just trying to survive, but within this market, within this context, it can be interpreted as you're being greedy, as you're essentially being criminal. And please always remember this, that if people continue to die, or rather, if people start dying and the number of people dying picks up, there will eventually be inquiries. There will eventually be inquisitions. Remembering that one of the things that was gazetted very early on was the criminalization of murder, the criminalization of you making other people sick so that they die. That has been criminalized. There are criminal penalties which are not only finable, but jailable as well. And there will eventually be adjudications of your behavior. And the people whose necks will be on the block will, in fact, be the chief executive officer and the board and the senior managers in the business. So please use your COP here to the extent of knowing that if you take unnecessary risks and chances with other people's lives, you will be held complicit in their murder should they die. Or you will be held complicit in them becoming injured because they contract coronavirus or whatever happens. So please use your COP. That affidavit is there for companies which are in the supply chain of the essential business sector, where if they do not supply those products, the essential businesses cannot operate. I was asked today, for example, about the construction sector. Now, there are elements of the construction sector which can be regarded as essential services. But generally, your building contractor who's fixing up your house is not in essential services. And so they cannot claim to be in essential services, and you cannot push them to be defined as essential services because otherwise you've got 3 weeks downtime on you continuing to fix up your house. The bank is being forced to be reasonable in not foreclosing, in not demanding, in not charging you interest, etc., etc. That system has been put in place. So please do not become complicit in murdering people. Essentially, that's the bottom line, whichever way you look at it. That affidavit is there exclusively for companies who are involved in the supply chain of essential services. Now, that affidavit must be filled in. You must try in that affidavit refer also to which essential services you are in the supply chain of. And what you should try and do is attach to the back of the affidavit proof of contracts or orders that you're supplying on in one way or another, which can all then be oathed either by a commissioner of oaths or your local police station. And every member of your team can then be carrying on with them on their person should they be stopped either by the police or by the South African National Defence Force. Now, I just want to say one thing about this, and that is stoppages, searches, seizures, and possibly arrests. I am going to be trying to interview Manny Witz, who some of you might know is a top criminal defense attorney in South Africa, because I think it's critically important that we hear directly from Manny in terms of the kind of evidence you need to have on your person, i.e. the affidavit and the supporting documents, number one, your rights if stopped, your rights if any of your product is seized, your rights if you are, God forbid, arrested, because then again, as someone mentioned to me very vociferously today, the police and the defense force will then become complicit in you getting ill and sick if they do the Harvey Weinstein thing and throw you into a general population who might have contracted the virus in the first place. So it's critically important that we talk to someone like Manny. I get the answers from Manny, and as soon as I've finished that interview, I will post it online for you and also for your staff to hear. Every member of your staff you have to have a discussion with about how they behave on the road, what they need to do on the road, etc. There is a document which is circulating, which is not fake news, but doesn't relate to South Africa. You might have seen it. It's a whole table. I think it's 2 pages of how to behave and what to do in certain situations, including, for example, if you're in your car, that you can have one passenger who must sit in the back seat, you must all wear masks, etc., etc., etc. That document originated in another country, and while we anticipate that kind of guideline, please God, we get that kind of guideline gazetted pretty soon. We have not yet had anything like that which has come out of any government department to date. So that it's not a false document, it's a guideline document, but it doesn't apply here in South Africa. I did want to make that point to you. So that deals with the issue of affidavits. I know I've had, through the course of the day, I've had many, many questions about affidavits. So again, I'll unmute your microphones just to hear if any of you have questions about the affidavit and how it should work.
Ivor, it's Laurentia again. Maybe just to share an experience, my husband works in the telecoms industry, so they provide equipment and services to all the big telecom networks, like MTN and Vodacom, etc. Right. So Vodacom actually today, they're sending out like a list to all of their suppliers where they must indicate which part of their business is essential to supporting them, right? And they needed actually to send them a list of the employees that during this time will be working and supporting them on site. And my understanding is that they must apply for some permit from government. So I'm not sure if you know anything about that and how that would work.
Well,
so I think that's my one question to you, but just to comment, sorry, on your comments on if there's only 2 of your 10 business units that actually supports the essential services, then it's only those 2 that will be allowed to continue operating, not the whole of your business.
Absolutely. That is exactly the point. Well, let's put it this way. Laurentia, let me answer you in this way. Let me say to you that that's the way it should be working. Remember that there is just not enough capacity in government to police every single business and what's happening in every single business. So the majority of times anything is going to happen, they're going to happen either because there's been a complaint or because a policeman or a defense force person has passed by your business and seen it open, or because your car has been stopped on the road. In other words, by exception rather than by rule. I can tell you that I've spoken to 2 different government departments. I've spoken to the DTI. I've also spoken to the Department of Finance about the notion of the permit story, and they've both said that there's no national licensing system at the moment that is being implemented. There are some government departments that will have internal licensing activities of essential services, particularly around local government and local government support services. But generally, there is currently no national licensing services which is being envisaged. However, as we know, things can change literally within minutes, be gazetted within minutes, and we'll certainly keep you updated with all of the gazettes as they come out. And as you know, some bright spark might have the idea to go to a government minister, suggest it, and be able to turn it around quickly enough for it to become a national activity. So I wouldn't hold out for a national licensing system around essential services. It is very much at this moment in time on the basis of your self-motivation against guidelines, quite frankly, which at the moment have not been gazetted, but we anticipate them being gazetted in the next couple of hours. But let's see how things evolve. I just want to read you something, ladies and gentlemen, that I did receive from one of my clients this morning, which was very, very disturbing. Morning, guys. Please note that the police just arrived at our premises and stopped all services. All staff on site need to assemble to be counted. This is a developing story. I'll keep you updated. Next post. This is in regards with a stipulation of not more than 100 people gathering at a vicinity. You will get feedback after our discussion with the police. Interesting to see how this will play out. Next post. Feedback from the police. The police counted all staff on site today, and they were less than 50 people. The police will return again tomorrow. We have contacted our legal department, as currently the new law only indicates that public gatherings should be below 100 and are not referencing any production facility. Right. We've just had a call from our company. The police visited them again today, and they were forced to stop production. They had a long discussion with their legal entity as well as that of the police department. According to the police, each region can interpret the regulations as they see it fit. The police are handling the application for particular industries as essential services, and then they name the person at the police station to talk to. So the point that's being made is that police stations and police personnel are finding it very, very difficult to operationalize the current scenario, and they're making rules and laws up as they go along the way. And you must feel free to challenge either directly, maybe not directly when you're in the situation, but certainly on a legal basis with the commanders of the local police station, etc., when you're in a safe place to do so. And if you have access to a legal department or a lawyer, through your lawyer or legal department, but to challenge unfair decision, inappropriate decision, illogical decision making by the police services. And that's just for you to know and for you to be aware of. All right, so now I want to go to Di Wilson's question, which was about the retail industry. Di, won't you just repeat your question again, please?
Thanks, Ivor. So I've been asked, obviously, because we're in the media and advertising space, that supermarkets and pharmacies will be open. And what we wanted to know, and if you had any idea, will they be changing their trading terms? And is it just FMCG like Pick and Pay, or do you know anything about that and trading times?
All right. So Di, certainly there has not been any indication to date in any of the gazettes which have been published, and they've been scarce, by the way, about essential services. And we do expect more definitive documents to be coming out a little later this evening or tomorrow morning. But as things stand at this moment in time, it is business as usual in the retail sector. However, there have been verbal indications from the various ministers that those retailers have to control the number of people in their establishments, number one, but they also have to run on skeleton staff within each department. They have to remain functional, but they have to keep social distancing and remain and try and operate on a skeleton of staff as is possible, because obviously those retail companies become hotbeds of problems when it comes to the opposite of social distancing. So the answer is there has been nothing that has been gazetted in the marketplace except for one indication which has been widely circulated, and we circulated it as well, about the food retail sector, where the chairperson of the hospitality sector council has said that all restaurants, all takeaways, all delivery services have in fact been suspended, and that was then supported by a notice from the Department of Trade and Industry. I've got a copy of that I will be referring to in a little way. Someone pointed out that it wasn't a signed notice, but please take note, people, that just because these notices are not signed doesn't mean that they're automatically fake news. But again, there's been no comment by any government minister about the veracity of the restaurant business being closed down either. So we really are up in the air in that regard. But as far as retailers are concerned, no, there hasn't been any directive as to trading hours. There hasn't been any directive, but there have certainly been a certain number of verbal indications from the minister and director generals and other government departments about how retailers should be conducting their affairs. I know that gives you no specificity whatsoever, Di. At this moment in time, it is about retailers being mature enough to self-manage their environment in a responsible way. I know there has also been talk of landlords wanting to close entire shopping centers down. They will be prohibited from closing entire shopping centers down. They will have to allow essential service tenants to continue to trade in those environments. And they will also have to be flexible in terms of lease payments and everything else that they charge for on an ongoing basis. Remembering that in any retail environment, the quality of your security has to be jacked up and beefed up, because those are the individuals who are going to control entry and exit in your business. Those are the people who are going to have to be counting people coming into your business, and those are the people who have to be enforcing social distancing as well. So please do not take that lightly, and talk to your commissioned security companies, not just the security guards who are on your premises. Any further questions about that?
Thank you, Ivor. That was very helpful.
Sorry, it was as helpful as mud, but unfortunately I can't say anything else.
It at least gives us an idea how to respond at this moment. So,
okay.
Thank you.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I want to do now is I want to very quickly go through some of the documents that have been circulating. So let's start with this document over here. And this document over here, as you can all see, is a document which was what I just referred to about the national lockdown notice of the restaurant industry. Now, this document itself here could actually be absolutely false, particularly when you look at spelling and when you look at font placement. Look at national is spelled here. It is not signed by the Minister of Tourism. So the reality is this in itself could be absolutely fake news, and it could be a fake document. However, the reality is that seen in context, this might just be some idiot trying to prove the point, because in fact the point was made by the chairperson of the Association for the Restaurateurs, and that's a more important point for you to understand. So knowing that, I think you need to think 3 or 4 times about not following the notion that the entire restaurant sector for the time being is embargoed and is closed down. Just before I go to the next document, I see that Sharon Haig from the Contact Center Management Group has asked a question. Any advice for the contact center industry? Well, Sharon, as you know, contact centers are completely regarded as essential services where they can show that there is a contract of commission from an essential service. In other words, that they're a contact center for a government department, for a hospital, for the National Communicable Disease Organization, etc., etc. God forbid a contact center should do one of these hello, how are you, rubbish calls. I nearly used another word. God forbid that should happen. The CEO of that contact center will be hung in Louis Botha Avenue. I give you my word, I will make sure that happens. God forbid someone tries to sell me Vodacom time or tries to sell me another bank account. And Sharon, I think this is your responsibility. You are the chairperson. You are the CEO of the CCMG. It is your responsibility to make your contact centers understand that their behavior is now under the spotlight. And should they abuse the notion that if they are not related to an essential service, no business in South Africa on moral grounds will ever do business with them again. And we will start a national campaign to make sure that happens. So they must restrict their activities to essential services. You see, I was diplomatic in my last sentence. But seriously, You're very lucky I didn't get someone trying to sell me airtime today. That's all I can say, Sharon. Okay, so moving on. Sorry, I'm not blaming Sharon Haig, everybody, and I'll give you a number a little later. She's only the chairperson of or rather the CEO of the entire association for the sector. Sharon, so nice having you on board. Okay, so moving on. This is the next document you all need to be aware of. And this, by the way, the Easy Aid Guide for Employers is not something new. It's not something which has only come about now in relation to coronavirus. This facility, this benefit has been available since 2019 and has been openly accessible to everybody. However, within the context of it, this guide has in fact been updated and customized for you to include national disaster benefits with the extension of COVID-19. So the employer may decide, as a direct result from the current COVID-19 epidemic, to close their business for a period and send employees home. This constitutes a temporary layoff. If the employer cannot pay his employees for this period, the employer can apply for the national disaster benefit from the UIF. So as you can see, it was a document which predated yesterday's announcement by the president, and as such, it would apply in circumstances where we do not have a national lockdown or a national shutdown. Now, when you consider, again, ladies and gentlemen, that we are going to go way beyond the next 3 weeks before we have any kind of normalcy in South Africa, you need to keep this document, because this document will very, very definitely apply to how you manage your activities in the workplace. All of these documents I will be making available to you as a resource guide to everybody who's indicated that they want to be on this webinar call. So please be aware that that is a document. It is the final published document which was published. So it is a formal government document. It does relate to a formal government scheme under the Department of Employment and Labor, not small business. Not DTI, the Department of Employment and Labor, which is where the Unemployment Insurance Fund vests. So please keep that in your back pocket. The next thing that you need to keep in your back pocket is this document, and this is very definitely for me, this is the diamond in all of the pieces and all of the tools which to date have been created. It is the temporary employer-employee relief scheme. As you can see, it also predates the announcement by the president. This was 11th of December 2019, when it was approved by the Director General of the Department of Employment and Labor. And UIF funds are able to be used for distressed companies directly in relation to temporary employer-employee relief schemes. The distressed company will only be funded if it meets the key requirements, which are able to demonstrate that it's been compliant with UIF legislation. If not compliant, undertakes to pay outstanding contributions on behalf of staff members. It's able to demonstrate that it will or has embarked on a turnaround or sustainability program, in other words, under the normal economic downturn, not because of coronavirus, and that it is able to meet its obligation in relation to UIF legislation. There is a central adjudication committee which will decide whether or not you should get distressed funding, and it very much is going to be customized to your needs, to your funds, and what it is you're asking, where you're asserting distress, and what it is you're asking to have covered. And as you can see, the kinds of evidence that you're asking to submit, invoices supported by proof of employment, list of employees, salaries of directors, dedicated bank account, registration on the central supplier database, which is Department of Trade and Industry, power of attorney, turnaround strategy, report on progress. This is all standard stuff which isn't coronavirus specific, but has been a scheme which is available to you for a long period of time and will continue to be available to you. That document as well will be made available in the pack that we send out. Then the original Gazette, which gave rise to the whole, it seems like months ago, but it was the 18th of March that it was published, but which gave rise to the whole strategy on coronavirus, will be in the pack as well. Then the I won't call them conflictual, but the two issues which the Department of Small Business, as is they want, have managed to really complicate and really muddy the waters around. And that is the SME emergency funding package, which was published. And unfortunately, in that emergency funding package, as you know, unfortunately, there was reference to, let's just see if we can find it, but there was reference, unfortunately, to the qualifying criteria that a company must be 51% black owned to be benefiting. And more importantly, the kind of scenario which almost makes it impossible for any company to tender, which has not been in business for a long period of time. But nevertheless, there was then a explanatory document which muddied the waters even further, or rather confirmed that the waters were to be muddied. That was produced from Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, the proposed industrial responsive fund for COVID-19 intervention. And as you can see, there's a spelling error there. Whoever is producing these documents is either, quite frankly, all right, let me not say, but not very professional. But more importantly, as you can see, this document doesn't veer from what you saw in the previous document, which is that the one qualifying criteria is that the company has greater than 50% black shareholding and management control, must be directly involved in day-to-day running of the operation, etc., etc. While under normal triple BE terms, those are laudable criteria. In this situation, certainly many businesses which are operative in this sector of producing and supplying these things over here will simply not have met that particular mark, and nevertheless are in a position to supply. And this is the problem that the Department of Small Business is currently creating between themselves and Department of Trade and Industry and Department of Health, that if they restrict government investment into 51% black-owned businesses supplying all of these highly specialized products, etc., and some of them manufacturing these highly specialized products, we are going to have a big problem in terms of the supply of this stuff into the South African market. It has been taken up by AfriForum. I am also interviewing the CEO of NIASA, which has 10,000 small businesses around the country, Gerard Papenfuss, and I'll hopefully post that interview tomorrow with Gerard, just to talk about that issue. Okay, so these two documents will be included in the pack. And as soon as we get gazettes, we'll link them back to those documents. This is a problematic issue for some people that we've noticed on site. This is the Small Business Development website where you're expected to apply for the relief that those previous documents speak about. And as you can see, there are some very specific criteria that ask you about shareholding, ask you about race, disability, women, and really drill down so that in the registration of your business for those types of benefits and incentives, you can see very much that this is the 51% scenario that the Department of Small Business has created this website around, including, by the way, the listing of the various subsectors that they would qualify companies to receive government incentives around. All of these subsectors are the ones previously spoken about, and in terms of food products as well. It doesn't augur well the messages which are being sent to traditional pre-existing businesses. It's almost as if the Department of Small Business Development has made the decision, seen the opportunity to close down industries and reinvent those industries because of coronavirus in the way that they would like to see those industries recreated. And that's obviously not in line with the Tumamina, with the coming together as a country speech which was made by the president last night. So, except that the Minister of Small Business Development came on and said, no, none of this is true this afternoon. So they've obviously had a rethink now. I wonder if we'll see a change to the algorithm in the website, but more importantly, I wonder if we'll see a change to that 51% factor disappearing overnight in the new Gazette. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we've spoken about a lot today. Are there any questions, any general considerations? Ivan Blumenthal says, can you send that via the group? I don't see it. Of course, we'll send all of these documents via the group. Sharon has said to me, now, please do not have a go at me personally. I'm not responsible for the entire contact center industry in South Africa. No, you're not, Sharon. I really do. Walk back all of those negative comments. You know I love you. All right, moving on. Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you this. Are there any points, any questions, any points of clarification any of you would like to be asking, or any comments you'd simply like to be making?
I'd like to make a quick comment.
Sorry, who is that?
Oran?
Oh, hello, Oran. Welcome. Thank you. Sorry, man, you got the wrong link, but thank you for joining us eventually.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us. I think my biggest concern at the moment is planning for 21 days and planning for 3 months or 6 months. All have different decisional focuses. And I guess my question is, I mean, I think we're all sitting in uncertainty, but do you have a sense of how long this might last? Because after 3 months, 3 weeks, we'll probably be in a situation where we'll have the true view of how many cases are in this country, and it would have spread throughout the country. So I just want to know if, to open the conversation on how long do people feel this might take? I know how long is a piece of string, but yeah.
So, Oran, let me come in here and say this, that the assumption, is that government have said, what is the maximum amount of time we can afford to have an absolute lockdown in South Africa, during which time the effect of flattening the curve can then be felt within 4 weeks after that 3 weeks has passed, because that's normally the running time to look at the effect and see the effect of that 3 weeks downtime. So you can, I think you've got a 60% reliance on the fact that we will have a 3-week lockdown period, during which time that lockdown will then be released for evaluation. And that evaluation will take a pretty long time to determine. Now, the idea will then be that your staff will be able to come back to work and you will be able to recommence with your business processes, because in fact we will have reacculturated South Africa to the extent that South Africans will now be completely aware of space, social distancing, and in fact hygiene factors ordinarily drummed into them over at least a 2-month period. So that is certainly the feeling, that you can plan that there will be elements of reintroduction of your business processes after the end of that 3-week period, unless something else happens. And what that something else is unless our rate of infections climb to the extent that they're currently climbing. I had a discussion with someone this afternoon, and I didn't have the heart. The person said to me, we've seen the fake news that South Africa is the #1 contracting country in the world, and yet, look, we've had no deaths, etc., etc., etc. Spain is very definitely far out there. Italy is certainly far out there, and South Africa is nowhere close. That's not the issue. The issue is that the period of time that it has taken for us to go from 60 to 600 is the fastest in the world, with testing having kicked in. So our rate of increase has proven now to be the fastest in the world. We have overtaken Italy, we have overtaken China, we have overtaken Spain in terms of the rate of contraction, not the deaths. We've only got 2 people on ventilators as we speak now, this moment in time today. But it's the rate of contraction that puts us up there at the highest point of the list rather than down in the lowest point of the list. Now, it is for that reason that our government have made the decision they've made. If these 3 weeks do not change the culture of South Africa to respect social distancing, to take all of the personal precautions, so that on a collective basis we are saving each other's lives, then 3 weeks will become 3 months of lockdown. So you can plan to have your businesses getting back to usual, even if it's on a graduated rollout period for the 3 weeks following this 3 weeks. However, we will know before the end of this 3-week session, we will know before the end of the 16th of April as to whether or not our culture has changed to the extent that we can rely on trusting the citizens of this country and go back to work. So, Aaron, I can't give you a Bible or an indicator on planning, but what I can tell you is that we have to collectively be doing everything we can to make sure that our friends, our family, and our staff understand the principles of hygiene, social distancing, and self-isolation, so that when we do get an opportunity to socialize again, it is on mature principles rather than the immature principles that, let's be honest, we as South Africans are so very well known for around the world. And I don't know if any of you have seen those postings from Valley of the Waves at Sun City over the last week, but that should tell you everything there is to tell you about the problem we currently have. I'm sorry at this stage, Aaron, that I cannot give you more specificity, except to say, plan for a graduated reintroduction of your various departments in your company after the 16th of April, but have a backup plan for an extension of the lockdown if things do not come right. And what needs to come right is the culture of this country and adult behavior, and, to be honest, the behavior of young people as well in this country. I'm sorry, I cannot be more specific than that. Anybody else want to ask or say anything more specifically?
Ivor, it's James here.
James Scott,
just
editor of Business Brief, thought leader of South Africa. Yes, sir.
Hardly. Just an observation, because it hasn't come up, but obviously as people recover, there should be some way that they should be certificated by a medical practitioner and then reintroduced back into the workforce.
So a hospital will simply give an individual, if you're lucky, will simply give an individual a statement of results. And the statement of results will say that you are now negative and that therefore you are fully recovered. Oh, by the way, sorry, just to tell you all, Manny Witz has just sent me something. Directions issued in terms of regulation under the Disaster Management Act 2002, published by the Minister of Justice. I will post that immediately on our site, guys, so that you have sight of it. So in answer to your question, James, someone won't get a special certificate, but they will get a statement of results. Well, hopefully they'll get a statement of results. If you're positive, you'll get a statement of results. If you're negative thereafter. If you're negative, you generally don't get a statement of results if you haven't tested positive. But certainly
No, I'm talking.
Yes, sorry.
I'm talking about somebody who has had it and survived, and is now effectively immune, and therefore can be part of the active workforce. I suppose there's still the risk of them being able to transmit the disease if they touch it. If they touch something that is contaminated, but it does mean that they're immune and that they maybe should. I just want to know if there were any conversations in that line going forward.
So to the best of my knowledge, there haven't been public conversations in that regard. It would be something critically important, I think, to bring to the attention of the DTI and the Department of Labor. And certainly I'll endeavor to try and do that. So thanks for that, James.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Ivor.
Yes, who is
Ivan?
that?
Yeah, Ivan.
Which Ivan?
Blumenfeld.
Oh, hello, Ivan Blumenfeld here, the bane of my existence. Yes, what can we do for you, sir?
Of course. Just on the PAYE and all those discounts, are they going to be automated on SARS's payroll submissions, or is it a manual calculation? Because when the VAT changed over, it was a nightmare. Are these the deductions and percentages for those adjustments? Do we just do them, or they're going to be shown automatically, and any other rebates?
So as far as the deductions are concerned, so for example, something like the way ETI works is a self-management activity. But really, I can't tell you, Ivan. I cannot tell you until we've seen the Gazette as to how that's going to work or not work. What we might do is it might be necessary to have a shorter webinar specifically on that Gazette when it comes out, because it is going to affect your bottom line.
Yeah, because it's all pretty complicated and confusing when you're a small little business without people running those departments.
Of course. No question about that.
Thank
Any other questions? Okay, no other questions. Ladies and gentlemen, look, thank you all for attending. Thank you very much for attending. We've certainly had, I think, a good smack at this discussion. Like I say, please expect 2 interviews. The one will be with Manny Witz on your rights in terms of stoppage, seizures, arrests, and all sorts of nefarious things happening to you in prison. And the other interview will be with Gerard Papenfuss, who represents 10,000 small businesses as NIASA in South Africa, as to their response to this Minister of Small Business. Why is it that that's always the gap in our government departments, the Ministry of Small Business? But nevertheless, that's what we're having to deal with at this moment in time. Thank you all so much for joining me. I love these sessions. I hope you don't find it rambles on too much. This recording will be posted as a link as soon as we've produced it. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Ivan. Cheers.
Thank you, Ava.
Thank you, Ava.
you.
Thank you so much.